Hello and welcome to another episode of Purple Ponderings. Today we have a guest, Gopi Rangan from Sure Ventures, on our show. And I'm really very happy because Gopi is one of those few people who has had a profound impact on me as a founder in how fundraising should be done, could be done. How do investors really think about working with founders? So I'm really interested in having his thoughts and stories really be shared with you. So on that note, Gopi, welcome to the show. If you don't mind, can you take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about your background and also one thing that most people may not know about you?
Certainly. Pankaj, thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest on Purple Ponderings. This is a very interesting, very insightful podcast you do. It's a video podcast, and I've watched many of your YouTube videos. It's very interesting to learn from real stories shared by founders and investors on your podcast. I'm honored to have the opportunity to share my stories with you. One thing that people may not know about me, I started a podcast myself. It's called The Sure Shot Entrepreneur. I interview venture capital investors and ask them questions about how do they make decisions, what goes on in their mind in the first meeting with the founder. The reason why I started doing this is a lot of founders complain that, and it's a legitimate complaint, that they don't understand how investors think, how they make decisions, how they form opinions. And especially if founders come from underprivileged backgrounds, they don't have the opportunity to prepare to go into the first meeting. And therefore, the first meeting is not as effective. I want to demystify the process. Not a lot of people know about it. Maybe a couple of thousand people listen to it every month. But I would like to make this available to more founders out there in the world so they can learn from the real life stories that VCs share on my podcast.
Absolutely, and I want to share this with my audience as well. That I have become a very big podcast fan of Sure Shot Entrepreneurs. Not only is Gopi asking the questions on his podcast, because there are at this point many podcasts about investors and fundraising, but Gopi does it in a way which is very it gives the insights for a prospective founder to understand how does this particular VC think about things. And even though there are some parallels, I've listened to many of the podcasts, Gopi, and I can see some parallels. Like most people are talking about what are some of the things that they want to see, but there is always some unique aspect of that particular investor that they are sharing, which is a huge input and insight for the founder in their preparation process to connect very quickly with that particular investor, right, and get to the point. So again, to everybody, it's a big pitch for watching Gopi's show. So Gopi, thanks for sharing that. But tell us one thing which is very unique about you.
One thing very unique about me, I like working with ambitious people. Throughout my childhood and throughout my career, I've really enjoyed unlocking potential in other people. I love playing the role on the side as a coach or a supporter. That's very different from most other people that I've seen. A lot of people, especially in the business world, they want to be the player, they want to be the striker, they want to be the one that holds the cup and be in the front page of the newspaper. And absolutely, I would support that. I've always had this role of playing a support position, and especially as someone behind the scenes who likes working with ambitious people and unlocking potential in them. That would be something that's different. And not a lot of people really enjoy that role. I've seen a few VCs really enjoy that role, and it's a perfect role for me as a VC.
Yeah. No, I will actually take it a step forward and for the better. I don't normally do this, but I will tell my audience that the one thing which I think I found very unique with Gopi is his desire to help founders. And every investor says that they're there to help founders, and I can tell you 99% of the time it's all BS or it's just hypocritical. They really don't mean it. Gopi is one of the very few people who actually means it. He generally, like when he says that if he can't help the founder, he probably won't go further with them. But I've seen him, really wanting to be helpful to the founders. So I'll say that is very, very unique about you, Gopi. So on that note, a quick question for you on, you have had a pretty interesting background and you got into venture and you decided to stay in venture. Can you tell us a little bit about your story on how you get to where you are and why do you stay there?
That's a very broad question. I'm happy to give you a short story on how I got to where I am. You mentioned that I help founders, but it's really difficult to help founders. It's not like I have all the answers. Uh, it's something that inspires me listening to the story of a founder. It's amazing to hear how they have synthesized the world and how they envision the future and what kind of future they would like to see. If I can be a small part of that journey and help them unleash potential in whatever business idea that they have, if I can play a small role, that would be very fulfilling and very satisfying. I don't really claim that I contribute a lot, and talking to me or spending time with me would certainly make them successful. Probably not, but occasionally I can be useful, maybe with a brainstorming session or an introduction. My career is kind of that way as well. I started out as an engineer, a software engineer, hardware engineer, and then I switched to the venture capital world about almost 15 years ago now. Now, having sat through hundreds or thousands of pitches over the past 15 years, I've realized that this is where I want to be. The opportunity to find entrepreneurs at the earliest stages is very, very satisfying. Listening to the stories when it's not fully formed. I joke that I invest in founders who have typos in their pitch deck. I don't really want to hear the full polished stories. I've heard that. I've been on boards of companies, and it becomes really difficult to hear the authentic story when things are polished and then I have to read between the lines to see what's there. I would rather listen to the story in raw format. The the kind of problems that founders want to solve, these are problems that the world is screaming for. Sometimes even the industries haven't been created and they're creating whole new industries. That's really satisfying and fulfilling for me. So going back in my career, for example, I invested in IoT, one of the first IoT IPOs. The ticker symbol was IoTS, called Adesto Technologies. This company, this was in like 2010, 11, 12, when I started tracking them and started investing. They were pioneers in that space. They really were riding that wave when IoT was beginning to form. But now IoT is well understood and everybody sees that there's an opportunity here. So I take pride in the fact that I can see these opportunities, and the founders see these opportunities, and I can support them in their journey of creating a successful business and hopefully making changes in the industry. That's been my career, and I've loved bringing my knowledge and experience in engineering and the understanding of the business side together to help founders unleash maximum potential.
Awesome, amazing. You touched upon IoT and 2010, 11, 12, I can imagine those were really early days. I wanted to ask you a question about your perspective on these emerging technologies, right? So we've had technologies emerge every decade, right? There's been, in fact, I would say now the pace of new technologies coming in, whether that's blockchain or Web3 or crypto now, or IoT and AI, say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it's always been there. What has been your perspective on how do you evaluate these technologies against, let's say, the sort of the business needs, right? I know you're focused on the fintech and the Insurtech side of the world, but just wanted to get a sense of, is there a framework that you apply when you are evaluating these technologies and opportunities?
So there are a few important things that I care about, and then there are a set of things that part of the due diligence process. The first most important thing I care about is, are the founders mission driven? Are they committed for the long term? Will they weather through ups and downs? The journey of a founder, even seasoned venture capital investors don't seem to empathize with the high highs and low lows the founders go through. That is the first piece that I look for. Are the founders genuinely committed, and do they really want to build this against all odds? Are they committed for many, many years with this business? And the second piece is there the problem that they're solving, is there a perfect fit where the founder's experience, the founder's vision for the future, and the market opportunity where they can build a solution that the world needs, does that come together? It dovetails very closely with the personality of the founder, the professional experience of the team, the problem that they want to solve, and the customers that they want to sell. I'm grouping this all together because very often the question comes up, oh, do you invest in founders or do you invest in ideas? And to me, it's together, the idea and the founder together. Is this a good fit? Is this the kind of problem that the founder, when he or she solves it, it will really make a difference in the world? So I look for that. Then there's a long list of many things, like, is this a large market, or will this be a large market in the future, even if it's not today? What is the business model? How are they going to sell to customers? Who would be the first set of customers? Why would they believe in adopting a solution like this? Where is the next phase of the business? How big can this be when everything works well? In a normal world, which is where there's a big difference between venture capital and the rest of the business world, the rest of the business world is a very skeptical world, and people always ask questions, what can go wrong? I live in an optimistic world where we ask the question, what if this goes right? How big can this be? And that's very important for me. The signs of the founder evolving, they don't need to be fully there with their leadership skills and management skills, but I want to see the signs where they have the potential to grow along with the company, and they're able to attract good talent. They're able to groom the next generation of management team. So as the company grows, will they be able to do that? I want to see signs of that. Across the companies that I've invested, I've seen many examples of stories like this where founders have tackled important problems, and they've also grown along with the company. These are some of the topics that I discuss with founders before I make investment decisions. A lot of this is also case by case, depending on the situation, the company that I'm talking to. Some of these questions will change, and I would dive into more details on certain topics and less on the others.
Got it. So, Gopi, my next question is related to something that you just mentioned in terms of, your evaluation criteria and how you sift through these opportunities and deal flows that come to you. But in your experience, what would you say is the number one mistake that you've seen some of the founders or companies that you invested in make that we could all learn from?
I wouldn't really call them mistakes. There are many reasons a startup could fail. The odds are actually stacked against them. So there are so many hurdles that they have to cross. So I wouldn't call most of those mistakes, although in hindsight, when we do postmortem about a company, we can see that, hey, these are all mistakes that we could have avoided. The number one thing that I see with many founders is that they are not ambitious enough. They want to build something, and they want to see how this works, and they have a short window of patience. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe a year. I want founders to have a little more patience, and I want them to have a longer term thinking where they can really make this their life's work. That I don't see very often, especially outside Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, it's quite common to see that, but outside Silicon Valley, I don't see founders with that kind of ambition. Often that turns into selling the company too soon, or not taking opportunities with full force and taking advantage of situations that they come through. They settle for making sure that the company has an outcome and they are profitable enough to get to the next phase, but they rarely get to the world domination that many founders in Silicon Valley aim for. Can we grow this opportunity to be a global business? Can we dominate this space in an industry, or perhaps even create an industry and be a pioneer in this space? And those are the type of founders I like to work with. And I think many founders have that, but often they don't really take the next step forward to unleash maximum potential.
Got it. Understood. I just wanted to comment here something that what you just mentioned, right? So you're absolutely right. It's all about people talk about a 10-year window, right? You must be committed to go at least 10-year window. And I can tell you that I've heard that from many investors, but not you. But a lot of the investors, after that initial question, they're all about, while they expect and they want to hear that from the founders, they themselves don't have patience. They themselves want to have a return on their fund because they're now in year 3 out of the 7-year cycle. They have to return money to the LPs. Most of them are doing it as a job. And so, everything that you said about the founder exhibiting all of those characteristics, founders, true, good founders or people also want that in their investors. Unfortunately, I think in this world, you can imagine, like, there's a lot of founders who perhaps, are not there for the right reasons, but there are also a lot of investors or who are at least wearing that hat of being an investor, who don't, fall into that. So it's just something that I've noticed. I don't know. Just wanted you to, comment a little bit about as you see other investors, right, in how they have behaved with the startup companies and founders. Like, do you see that? Like, how do you? What are some maybe do's and don'ts for prospective founders to ask prospective investors to know which one is a good fit and which one is not a good fit?
That's a great way to think about this. I don't put the blame entirely on the founders. I think founders' lives are already so challenging. Now, asking them to push even further feels unreasonable. There is a significant responsibility on the investor side as well. But what happens, I have seen, is let's look at what has happened in the market in the past 15, 20 years. Until about 15, 20 years ago, there were a few hundred VC firms. And I would say among them, the top 20, 30% of them did a really good job of supporting founders with their ambitious plans. Now there are, I don't know, a few thousand VC firms, and there are a lot of corporate venture capital firms and family offices investing in this space. There are thousands of investors in the market. Not a lot of them have the same kind of mindset of aiming for the long term. When founders look for investment, I think it's very important, and it's good that you brought that up. It's good to ask the question: what is the mindset of the founder, of the investor? What is their mission? So, for example, my mission is to invest with a mission to enable peace of mind. I want to work with founders who create a better safety net for all of us. I want to work with founders who build better infrastructure for legacy industries like banking and insurance and other sectors. These are all industries that create the backbone of our economy. And those industries barely invest in any R&D. We are looking for innovation, and the responsibilities on the founders. The entire world is looking towards founders to build creative solutions. And when they're looking, when they're building solutions in this space, it's a great opportunity to build something massive and huge that will last for a long time. And when I invest in a startup, I'm looking at not getting out anytime soon, perhaps never, and it's okay. As long as the company is growing and making a huge impact in the world, let's just keep going. Why would we stop? I don't think all investors think that way. There are many investors who want to know that there will be an exit in the next 2 years, 3 years, and they want to have a plan. And when you bring such investors on board and the founders, they're already unsure about how to be very ambitious, their ambitions get tempered, and then they settle down for a shorter term exit. And that kind of spoils the opportunity for something that could have been huge. There are so many opportunities like that. Yeah. It's already hard enough to build something ambitious and huge when you have the intent, and there are a lot of logistical struggles along the way in building a business. When you compromise on the ambition already, when you are halfway through, it's very difficult to course correct and suddenly change the ambition.
Yeah. And I always say that you must, like, as a founder, the best way to figure out that mindset of the investor, because everybody will tell you the right words and use the right words now. How do you is to actually do a what I call an informal reference check, right? So if they've invested in some founders, and find a way to connect. Because one thing I've seen founder to founder is there is this great affinity to help and support.
Yeah.
Right. And I've seen that when I've reached out to other founders, and you get an unbiased feedback, right? Outside. So that's been pretty interesting for me. Well, that brings us to an interesting point, Gopi. These are interesting times happening right now, right? Like, 3 months ago, had we been recording this podcast, the outside environment was so different, right? Everything was hunky dory, and you know, money was flooding, and it was a founder's, world in terms of picking and choosing who to work with, how much money to take, and investors were falling over themselves. Things have changed now. There is a potential recession coming in, etc. So, just wanted to get in just your broad perspective on, like, where we are, all of what has happened. What does that mean, look, going forward, say 6 months from your perspective, right? What are there any changes that you're looking to do, or from your perspective, as well as what could founders expect to see for help for them to be better prepared?
I see a significant change in the past 3-4 months. Valuations have certainly come down in the public market. That's obvious. There are clear indications that later stage companies are struggling to raise money, and the valuations are already coming down there. In my world, where I invest in the pre-seed or seed round, the first institutional round of funding founders raise. That world, I'm beginning to see changes. There are not a lot of companies that I used to meet. The pace at which I meet founders has significantly changed in the past 4 months. Some of it is good. Some of it is not so good. What happened in the past 2 years is there was too much of a hype. I think there was a lot of money chasing very few good founders, and that created a frenzy, and valuations were overhyped. Some of it was probably not well deserved, and it's good that the market's correcting a little bit. I am worried about the long term. If we go into a long-term recession, 2 years, 3 years plus, that begins to affect innovation. Like I said earlier, there are many industries that rely on startups to bring innovative solutions, and we want to support that innovation. And I hope that the recession or the downturn remains short-term, and after the correction, we come back to normal business. We'll see in the next 6 to 9 months how that shapes up. I'm optimistic. I live in an optimistic world as a venture capital investor, that I expect that in about a year to 2 years, things should be back to normal, where good companies will prevail, and some of the companies that probably shouldn't get funded shouldn't have received funding. They received funding from investors. They didn't know what they were doing, and a lot of that would likely go away from the market, and that will correct the founders. It's actually good for the market overall, and the good founders will stand out if they have a good business, good customers, and good products. I think they will have no problems weathering through the ups and downs of the market. This is definitely going to be difficult for everybody, even many VCs, because there are thousands of new VC firms that were formed, and many of them may not survive through the downturn. But I'm hoping that we come out of this on the positive side.
Got it. Well, on that optimistic note, let's do a little segue and allow our listeners to learn a little bit about Gopi as a personality, right? So I'm going to ask you a few questions just related to yourself. What has been your biggest achievement, as well as your biggest learning till date?
My biggest achievement is my life as an immigrant, and how my family and I have established ourselves in the US. I was born in India. I grew up there. I went to college there. I came to the US for graduate education. I'm an immigrant, Indian American. I'm very proud of that. The combination of the cultural ethnic background as an Indian, and how opportunities were made available to me in the US, and how I've taken advantage of those opportunities to create a life in the US as an immigrant, that is something that I'm very proud of. When I came to the US, I barely had any money. I remember I got my first paycheck when I was a tutor at the Disability Resource Center at Arizona State. I got my first paycheck, I used to eat bean burritos for 79 cents. And after I got that paycheck, I treated myself to a $1.09 7-layer burrito. And I held on to the receipt for many, many years. It was a moment that showed that a lot of things are possible. And that was the first indication that I could establish life here and it would be a fulfilling life. And I'm looking forward to the next few decades to see what comes up. And I'm very happy with the way we have many immigrants like you and me have been able to establish ourselves. And this is a land of immigrants. And I'm very thankful and proud of the possibilities that have been made possible for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can relate to that burrito story because, this is a shout out to my mother. She knows that she had asked me when I was, I think, 5 or 6. She still tells the story, what is it that I'm going to do with my first paycheck? And I am a big sweet tooth person. And, I had told her that I'll take this vanilla soft serve ice cream, quality ice cream. And that's what I did. Once I did post my engineering, got my first job, the first thing I did do was to buy that ice cream. And she still, I called her and said, listen, I've fulfilled my promise to myself and to you. So those stories absolutely, we can resonate. And what about learning, Gopi?
It's I can't think of another place like the US where opportunities are given to people like us, and we make the most out of it. Now, look at me. I'm running a venture capital firm, now, arguably one of the best jobs in the world. It is the best job in the world for me. I don't think these kind of opportunities are easily available for people. I came away thousands of miles away from my family, not knowing many people in the US when I first arrived, and now I've built an entire ecosystem around me, and that's incredibly unique to what we have in the US, and I hope that continues for many, many years and for many more people in the future. The lesson that I've learned is try. Just try. Experience is not necessary. If you wait for everything to fall in place, you will never start. Just try. Start somewhere. Try. A lot of us, especially when we in the middle class, we settle into this phase where it's just good enough, and we stop trying. The world needs a lot of builders. The world needs people who want to create. We don't want to give that up. As long as we are trying, we continue to learn. I've tried many things and I've failed at many things as well. I've tried starting companies that didn't succeed very well. And I've learned a lot of those lessons. There are many lessons that we can learn about ourselves and about the world. The lesson that I've learned the most is that we should try. And the more often we try.
And you're right. The fear of failure and the fear of the risk of trying. I think there's this old saying, right, that the biggest risk in life is not taking one at all.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just something that sounds good. It's worth practicing. As I say, you don't want to look back and regret that, hey, I wish I could have done this, or I wish I could have tried that. I think I'd rather try everything and then, like you said, see what sticks and what doesn't.
Yes.
Awesome. So Gopi, in your line of work, you have to, I'm sure, be able to keep up with a lot of information, right? Keep up to date with everything in the technology world and the business world. So tell us a little bit about what tools or what publications or what you read and keep yourself up to speed.
I actually don't read a lot. I have a lot of symptoms of dyslexia. So it's really hard for me to read long form content, especially books are very tedious. It's the wall of words really intimidates me. My source of knowledge is talking to people. I started out in my career as an engineer, software engineer, and then I was in the semiconductor world. Now I'm investing in Insurtech. I'm one of the first, if not the only investor when I started Sure Ventures that invested in the seed stage in Insurtech. And at that time, there were not zero unicorns in Insurtech. What has allowed me to learn about a whole new industry and be a leader in this space is the conversations that I had with so many different people. And I learned a lot through that. So I actively curate friendships, I actively curate relationships and nurture them, get to know people, sit down with them, ask them questions about their world, what's interesting in their life, in their work, and what can I pick up from their lessons and the insights that they share. That's my main source of information. I rely less on online content and social media and those kind of tools. I'm more old school. I like to sit down with people and talk to them.
Awesome. And Gopi, one question I always ask my guests is that if you were to listen to a future episode of this podcast, is there some guest, is there someone that you would like me to invite and get on this show that you might benefit in learning or listening to?
I'd love to hear more founder voices.
Okay.
There are quite a few VCs out there, and they're typically loud, and we don't want to hear more of those. I rarely do interviews like this. I'm very happy to be a host and ask questions. That's why I do the podcast. I very rarely give interviews where I am the guest. I think it's very, very insightful to hear founder stories. Each founder story is so unique and so different, and we can all learn from them. These are the brave heroes and heroines that go out and try and build something and make an attempt. And there are so many challenges that they overcome, both personal challenges and the challenges with their businesses. I love listening to those stories. I always tune into those kind of stories. I hope you bring on more founders.
Yes, we have some interesting founders lined up as well. So I'll certainly tag you when one of those gets recorded and published. Awesome. Well, we'll now kind of move to the last segment of this conversation. What I'm going to share with you are, I'd like for you to tell me a favorite person in certain areas and tell us why that person comes to your mind and, is your favorite. So the first one is someone who's a sports icon.
The sports icon I admire is my neighbor, Krishnamachari Srikanth. He played in the Indian cricket team that won the World Cup in 1983. It was the first World Cup India won. It showed me that someone from my neighborhood become a world hero. It gives me a lot of hope. And it's he was the largest run scorer in the final World Cup in London, in the UK, and he remains my hero. He's a character. He's unpredictable, unconventional. He doesn't play by the books. He's from an academic point of view, he's not a good cricket player, but he's the kind of special player we needed to make a difference for India to win the World Cup. And I keep that in mind, that be yourself, be authentic, and play your game, and that will make the world turn to look at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to tell the listeners that Krishnamachari Srikanth was a very important part of the Indian cricket team in 1983 that won the first World Cup of cricket. And there is a movie on Netflix right now, which was also released in theater, called 83. So if you want to know who Gopi is referring to, just please watch that movie on Netflix, and he's got a very lively character. I've also been following him on various TV shows. Amazing, very different personality.
He's a funny
compared
guy.
Compared to the part of people who don't know. Gopi is from South India, and South India is very reserved, very introverted. Kind of people. That's the stereotype. Here he was, K. Srikanth just kind of completely blasting those stereotype. In also the style of batting that he had was pretty unconventional. So I get that. Awesome. The next one is your favorite business leader.
My favorite business leader, I'm going to call this a group of people. These are the founders that I have invested in. I have a portfolio of 23 startups at Sure Ventures. I am in awe of these founders. They have weathered through a pandemic managing significant changes in their businesses, how they manage their teams, how they sell their products and services. Everything dramatically changed for them between February and March of 2020. It was one of the most significant, unpredictable events in business I've ever seen. They met with those challenges head on. They figured out a way to not only survive, but take advantage of those opportunities. When digital transformation became very aggressive during the past 2 years, they built solutions to capture those opportunities, and they have built amazing businesses. There are many examples I can give from my portfolio where Decent, for example, the founder launched a whole new insurance product for healthcare. He's helping small businesses buy healthcare solutions that are comparable or sometimes even better than solutions that are offered by large companies. And so far, they've struggled. The small businesses struggle to get good coverage and good price products. And Decent is making that possible for small businesses. There's an example of a company called Rocket Dollar. They're helping average individuals like you and me have access through their 401k and retirement plans to invest in alternate assets like real estate and angel investments and various things like that. Typically, through retirement accounts, you can only invest in stocks and bonds. Right. And that is a significant change. And making these kind of changes happen in the middle of a pandemic is extremely challenging. And they've not only made the business survive the past 2-3 years, but they've actually built the business so successfully, and they've been able to raise follow-on funding and grow their business at a rapid pace. It's unbelievable. I am in awe of all these founders that I've worked with over the past 2-3 years. They are my true heroes in the business world.
Got it. Political leader.
Political leader. I have a contrarian view on this. I think most politicians are not people that I admire. I want to see more average citizens come into the world of politics. And I think the political world in pretty much any country, it gathers people who are not, they don't operate with good intent. And they aim to get elected, they aim to be popular, and they optimize for those outcomes, irrespective of whether it's on the left or right. I admire these local politicians who really care about policies and changes that will happen in local regions. And that's admirable to me, much more than any of the global or national politicians.
Got it. And finally, a historical figure that you would want to be.
I'm a geek at heart. Stephen Hawking comes to mind when you ask that question. What a great mind. Like we have this vast universe that's probably 10 to 15 billion years old. And he was able to comprehend that in his small brain. The expanse of the universe, it's light years distance-wise, and it's to be able to comprehend that and to be able to contemplate about the universe in that small brain, and still be able to relate to everyday things, and so that he can translate his thoughts and comments into words that we can understand. There is something in that mind that goes on that I want to understand how it works, and I want to see the world through his eyes. If I had the opportunity, I would do that.
Awesome. Great. So, well, on that note, Gopi, we come to an end to this episode. Any final words from you for our audience?
Well, this has been great. It's you've given me the opportunity to talk about business, talk about startups, talk about my own personal life. It's rare to have the opportunity to be able to share my thoughts and ideas. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I look forward to sharing this video with my friends and family.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Gopi. And on that note, we come to an end. Dear friends, we will be back very soon with another episode of Purple Ponderings. Till then, goodbye.